it was the bite that changed everything. Not the feral, tearing bite of a rival in the heat of battle, but a deep, possessive claim that had, unknowingly, entwined their destinies. She was a warrior of the Stonehide clan, a swift and brutal force forged in the harsh winds of the northern plains. He was the chieftain of the Ironfang tribe, their ancient enemies from the shadowed mountain peaks. Now, with their clans locked in a brutal, escalating war, she found herself his captive. Not just a prisoner, but something far more binding. An unwilling mate. He saw her as a potential vulnerability, a tool in his arsenal. But Anya was not born to yield. She was born to conquer, and her captivity would become a crucible, transforming her into a weapon he never anticipated. The scent of blood and damp earth clung to Anya's fur, a grim perfume of the recent skirmish. The northern plains, usually a canvas of swaying grasses, were now churned mud, scarred by the claw marks of furious combat. She was a creature of the wind, her pelt the color of storm clouds, her eyes the piercing green of a hunter. As the beta of the Stonehide clan, her life was a testament to their unwavering tenacity, their ferocity in the face of any threat. Her fangs were honed, her claws sharp, and her spirit a blizzard that swept aside all weakness, especially when facing the Ironfang tribe. Their latest clash had been a vicious, unexpected ambush near the Whispering Divide, a narrow pass that connected their territories. Anya had been leading a reconnaissance team, assessing Ironfang movements, when they were suddenly overwhelmed. The fight was a blur of snarling forms and flashing claws under the dim, unforgiving light of a fading moon. It was there, amidst the chaotic swirl of bodies, that she had first truly confronted him, Kale, the formidable chieftain of the Ironfang tribe. Kale was a towering brute, his fur the deep, mottled gray of ancient stone, his eyes a chilling, intense amber that seemed to burn through any resistance. He was renowned for his unyielding strength, his tactical brilliance, and a raw, untamed power that made even the bravest Stonehide warriors hesitate. Their clans had been locked in bitter conflict for generations, a brutal dance of death fueled by ancient territorial disputes, scarce resources, and an unquenchable thirst for dominance. Each raid, each border skirmish, added another layer to the thick crimson history between them. In that brutal encounter at the Whispering Divide, Anya had fought with every ounce of her being, her focus narrowed to Kale's imposing form. She launched herself, a dark blur of motion, aiming for a disabling strike, a blow that would cripple the Ironfang leadership. Kale, however, was a whirlwind of power, his movements deceptively agile for his immense size. He met her charge head-on, their bodies colliding with bone-jarring force. The air crackled with their combined power, a silent testament to the ferocity of their mutual hatred. Their duel was a maelstrom of snarling fury, a grim waltz of death beneath the sliver of moon. Anya's claw raked across his flank, eliciting a guttural roar from him, but his retaliation was swift and devastating. He lunged, his jaws snapping with terrifying force, and in the chaos, his fangs sank deep into her shoulder, a searing pain exploding through her, momentarily crippling her. She cried out, a raw, involuntary sound, but before she could recover, before she could retaliate, the arrival of Stonehide reinforcements forced the Ironfang tribe to retreat, dragging their wounded, including a snarling Kale, back into the shadowed depths of the mountain range. Anya had limped back to the Stonehide warren, her shoulder throbbing, the twin puncture marks of Kale's bite a constant, painful reminder of their brutal encounter. The clan healers had tended to her, their poultices easing the pain, but the wound itself had lingered, a dull ache that seemed to radiate from within her very bones. She had dismissed it as a stubborn injury. a deep tear that would simply take time to mend. She had not, for a single moment, considered the true, terrifying implication of that bite. The thought of a bond, especially one with her sworn enemy, was utterly inconceivable. She was Stonehide, through and through, and Kale, the chieftain of the Ironfang tribe, was nothing but the enemy. The very notion of being tied to him was anathema, a betrayal of everything she stood for, a stain on her warrior's honor. Days later, the dull ache in her shoulder morphed into a strange, unsettling sensation, a subtle warmth that permeated her entire being, radiating outwards from the bite marks. She dismissed it as the lingering effects of deep tissue damage, a persistent phantom pain. Then, the dreams began. Vivid, unsettling dreams that were not her own. Dreams of vast, jagged mountain peaks, the scent of cold stone, and something else. Something primal and metallic, the unmistakable scent of the Ironfang tribe's territory. She saw fleeting images of powerful gray wolves, their eyes gleaming amber, their movements silent as falling snow. She felt a strange pull, a sense of disorientation, as if her own senses were being overlaid with another's. The Stonehide clan, sensing a shift in the delicate balance of power, was preparing for a retaliatory strike, a large-scale assault on the Ironfang tribe's mountain stronghold, determined to push them back from the whispering divide. Anya, despite the lingering odd sensations, was at the forefront of the preparations, her tactical mind sharp, her resolve unyielding. She spent hours with her chieftain, a wise, battle-hardened she-wolf named Garnet, meticulously planning every detail of the offensive. The bitterness of Kale's bite, the memory of his raw power, fueled her desire for retribution. As the day of the planned assault approached, the strange sensations intensified. The warmth in her shoulder grew almost feverish, and the intrusive dreams became more frequent, more vivid, bleeding into her waking hours. She started to experience flashes of unfamiliar emotions, a primal possessiveness, a simmering anger that was not her own, a strange, undeniable longing that left her utterly bewildered. It was as if a foreign current had been introduced into her very bloodstream, subtly altering her perceptions, her very essence. It was unsettling, disorienting, and frankly, terrifying. She tried to rationalize it, attributing it to fatigue, to the stress of impending battle, anything but the truth. But the truth was there, a growing, undeniable presence. She could feel his anger, his frustration, his raw, untamed power, a constant thrumming beneath her own skin. It was subtle at first, like a faint echo, but now it was becoming a resonant hum, a presence that was impossible to ignore. The day of the assault dawned, cold and crisp, the air thick with the scent of anticipation. Anya stood among her clan, her pale battle markings stark against her dark fur, her heart pounding with a familiar mix of adrenaline and fierce loyalty. But underneath, a strange, unsettling current ran through her. A pull, a deep magnetic draw that defied logic, defied her very will. As the Stonehide warriors surged forward, a wave of dark fur and gleaming fangs, Anya felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a sickening lurch in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear of combat. It was a primal alarm, a desperate warning that screamed through her very being, not from her own instincts, but from somewhere deeper, something connected to the very enemy she was about to face. She felt a strange, protective surge, a desperate need to stop the impending conflict, a feeling that shocked her to her core. Then, just as she was about to leap into the fray, a sudden, blinding surge of pain erupted from her shoulder, radiating through her entire body, a searing agony that brought her to her knees. It was a pain that felt impossibly deep, intimately connected to another, a mirroring of a wound inflicted elsewhere. And with that pain came an undeniable, terrifying realization. The bite. Cale's bite. It wasn't just a wound. It was a bond. And the bond was sealing. Irrevocably. Catastrophically. The enemy had marked her in battle, and now she was bound to him. Bound to her enemy. His mate. And just as the realization slammed into her, the Stonehide warriors crashed into the Ironfang tribe, and Anya, crippled by a pain that transcended the physical, felt herself fall, utterly vulnerable, into the heart of the R. Ensuing chaos. The pain was a white-hot spear, piercing Anya's very essence, a mirroring agony that resonated from Cale. She collapsed amidst the swirling chaos of the battlefield, the clash of fur and fang blurring into a deafening roar. Her own clan, the Stonehide warriors, surged past her, their faces grim masks of battle, oblivious to her internal torment. The primal urge to protect, to surrender, to yield to a connection she vehemently rejected, screamed through her mind, battling against every fiber of her warrior's spirit. It was an internal war, far more brutal than the physical one raging around her. Her body spasmed, racked with a pain that was both hers and his, a sickening confirmation of the bond. She could feel his presence, a powerful raw energy that now permeated her own being, a terrifying intrusion. The dreams, the sensations, the pull, it all coalesced into this agonizing reality. She was connected to Cale, the chieftain of the Ironfang tribe, her sworn enemy. He was her mate. The very thought repulsed her, violated her very being. A massive, shadowy form loomed over her, blocking out the frantic, chaotic movements of the battle. The scent of ancient stone and raw earth, undeniably Cale, filled her senses. His amber eyes, usually cold and unyielding, were wide with a primal confusion, a dawning realization that mirrored her own horror. He saw her crumpled form, writhing on the ground, and a guttural snarl ripped from his throat, not of aggression, but of bewildered fury. He lowered his head, his nose nudging her, a possessive, instinctive gesture that sent a fresh wave of revulsion and desperate longing through her. The conflicting emotions were tearing her apart, a whirlwind of desperate denial and an undeniable magnetic pull. Before either of them could fully process the catastrophic revelation, the tide of battle shifted. The Stonehide warriors, their initial surge faltering against the Ironfang's brutal defense, began to regroup. A powerful Stonehide warrior, Anya's second-in-command, Odin, a swift and agile male with striking auburn fur, saw her vulnerable position. He lunged forward, aiming a swift, debilitating blow at Cale, attempting to free his beta. Cale reacted with savage efficiency, a swift, brutal counterattack that sent Odin sprawling. But the distraction was enough. Ironfang warriors, responding to Cale's unspoken command, surged forward, their dark forms swarming around Anya. Before she could resist, before she could even fully comprehend what was happening, strong jaws clamped onto her limbs, not in aggression, but in restraint. She was lifted, her body still racked with the searing pain of the bonding, and carried away from the battlefield, deeper into the shadowed mountain passes, into the heart of enemy territory. She was a prisoner, and the very wolf who held her captive was also, impossibly, her mate. The journey to the Ironfang stronghold was a blur of agonizing pain and disorienting confusion. Anya fought against her captors with every ounce of strength she possessed, snarling, twisting, snapping. But the bonding pain was a constant, debilitating companion, radiating from her shoulder, making her movements sluggish, her will falter. Each time she struggled, a sharp, empathetic pang shot through her, a cruel reminder of her new, inescapable reality. They moved with a stealth that was unsettling, a silent, efficient procession through the dense, rocky terrain, past ancient, gnarled pines, until they reached the heart of the Ironfang territory. The stronghold was carved deep into the side of a massive, ancient rock formation, its entrance partially obscured by hanging moss and thorny bushes. It felt oppressive, dark, and utterly foreign, a stark contrast to the open plains of her homeland. She was taken deep within the stronghold, past numerous wary, hostile Ironfang wolves, their amber eyes glinting with suspicion and a primal curiosity. They knew. They could sense the bond, the impossible connection between their chieftain and the beta of their sworn enemy. Whispers followed her, a low guttural murmur that amplified her humiliation, her profound sense of being utterly out of place. She was placed in a secluded cavern, carved into the cool stone, stark and uninviting. There were no chains, no physical restraints, only the implicit threat of her surroundings and the suffocating weight of the bond. The pain began to recede, replaced by a dull ache, a constant hum beneath her skin. And with the receding pain came a wave of crushing despair. She was bound, trapped. Her identity, her loyalty, her very essence, seemingly compromised by a single brutal bite. Cale entered the cavern shortly after, his massive form filling the entrance, his amber eyes fixed on her. The primal confusion was still etched on his face, but now it was mingled with a grim, determined resolve. He shifted into his human form, a powerful, imposing figure with dark, rough-hewn hair and those unsettling amber eyes. He wore simple, practical clothing, dark leather and rough-spun fabric that emphasized his formidable physique, radiating an almost primal strength. Anya, still in her wolf form, snarled, a low, guttural warning that belied her inner turmoil. Her muscles tensed, ready to spring, even though every instinct screamed against it. The bond was a suffocating presence, a confusing mix of magnetic pull and utter revulsion, twisting her gut. Cale ignored her snarl, his gaze unwavering. He moved with a predatory grace, stopping a few feet from her, his presence dominating the small cavern. "The bond has sealed, Anya," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, devoid of emotion, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "You are mine now, my mate, and my prisoner." His words, spoken with such cold finality, ignited a furious blaze within her. She lunged, a desperate, irrational surge of defiance. But before she could reach him, the bonding pain flared, radiating from her shoulder, stronger than before, forcing her to collapse, whimpering, at his feet. It was a cruel, immediate punishment for her defiance, a brutal reminder of her new, inescapable reality, a physical manifestation of her subjugation. Cale watched her, his amber eyes unreadable, then knelt. He placed a large, calloused hand on her head, a possessive, claiming gesture that sent shivers of both revulsion and an unsettling warmth through her. "Fight it all you want, Anya," he murmured, his voice closer now, a low growl that vibrated through her fur. "It won't change anything. The bond is absolute. You are bound to me. And in this war, that makes you my greatest weakness, and perhaps my greatest weapon." He straightened, his gaze sweeping over her still struggling form. "You were born to conquer, Anya, but now you are bound to your enemy. Your fate is intertwined with mine, whether you accept it or not. And you will serve me, He turned, his dark form disappearing from the doorway, leaving Anya alone in the cold stone cavern, trapped by an invisible chain, bound to a destiny she utterly despised, a mate to the very wolf she was born to destroy. Her world, once clearly defined by loyalty and hatred, had shattered, leaving her adrift in a terrifying, unwanted intimacy, a prisoner in every sense of the word. The initial days of Anya's captivity in the Ironfang stronghold were a relentless cycle of physical confinement and profound internal conflict. The stone cavern, though devoid of visible restraints, felt like a tomb. The constant, subtle hum of the bond, a foreign current beneath her skin, served as a perpetual reminder of her unwanted connection to Kale. Every attempt at defiance, every surge of anger or rebellious thought was met with a dull ache, a subtle but persistent pressure that seemed to emanate from the bite marks on her shoulder. It was a cruel, invisible leash, constantly tugging her back from the precipice of outright rebellion, binding her to a will that was not her own. She spent hours in her wolf form, pacing the small cavern, her dark fur sleek and restless. Her green eyes, usually blazing with fierce independence, were now clouded with a desperate frustration, a profound sense of helplessness. She refused to shift into her human form, a silent protest, a desperate attempt to cling to the wild, untamed part of herself that refused to acknowledge any bond with her enemy, refused to acknowledge the very essence of her capture. Meals were brought to her by quiet, unsmiling Ironfang warriors, their amber eyes wary, their movements precise, like automatons following a grim command. She ate only when hunger became unbearable, her stomach churning with a mixture of resentment and a strange, unbidden curiosity about her captors. She could feel the stronghold's energy, the subtle shifts in the tribe dynamics, the undercurrents of suspicion and curiosity directed towards her. They were watching her, always watching, assessing her every move. Kale visited her often, his presence filling the small cavern with an undeniable power, a raw, untamed force that pressed in on her. He would shift into his human form, his dark, brooding presence dominating the space. He rarely spoke, simply observing her, his amber eyes piercing, unreadable, like ancient stones. Lyra met his gaze with unyielding defiance, a silent challenge that bristled with hatred. He would offer her food, sometimes just sit in quiet contemplation, his presence an unwelcome intrusion, yet strangely compelling, drawing her in even as she fought against it. The bond, even in its unwanted form, thrummed between them, an undeniable tension that filled the air, thick and heavy. One evening Kale entered, carrying a bowl of steaming broth, its rich aroma filling the cold cavern. Anya, weakened by her refusal to eat properly, felt her stomach rumble in protest, a betrayal of her stubborn will. He placed the bowl on the stone floor, his gaze fixed on her. "You need to eat, Anya," he stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble, devoid of inflection, yet carrying an undeniable authority. "You are weakening. That will not serve you well, or me," Anya snarled, a raw, defiant sound, a desperate attempt to assert her independence. She didn't want to be served, she wanted to be free. The thought of accepting anything from him, even sustenance, felt like a concession, a surrender of her very soul. Kale sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of ancient weariness, of burdens too long carried. He shifted, and in a fluid movement, transformed into his large gray wolf form, his muscles rippling under his thick fur. He nudged the bowl closer with his nose, then lay down a few feet away, watching her with an unsettling intensity. His presence, so close, so intimately connected, was almost unbearable, a suffocating weight. The bond pulsed, a strange, undeniable hum that seemed to urge her to comply, to yield to his silent command. Driven by an instinct for self-preservation, and a primal hunger she could no longer deny, Anya reluctantly approached the bowl. She lapped at the broth, her senses on high alert, acutely aware of Cale's unwavering gaze, feeling the heat of his gaze on her back. The warmth of the broth soothed her, and a small measure of strength began to return to her trembling limbs. She hated herself for accepting it, for acknowledging this unwanted connection. But survival was a powerful, undeniable instinct, one that transcended her pride. "We need to discuss the bond, Anya," Cale said after she had finished, his voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable authority. He had shifted back to his human form, his powerful frame now resting against the cool stone wall, his eyes fixed on her with an unyielding intensity. "It is sealed. There is no breaking it. You feel it as strongly as I do." Anya bristled, her fur rippling with indignation. "I feel nothing but disgust," she spat, her voice raw, strained from disuse, a desperate attempt to hide the truth. "I am Stonehide, you are Iron Fang. This thing between us, it's a curse, a violation of my very being." Cale's amber eyes flashed, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths, a silent challenge. "A curse or a destiny, it is irrelevant now. What matters is that it is real, and it changes everything. For both of us. My tribe knows, yours will soon realize it too." The thought of her clan, of Garnet discovering her forced bond with Cale, sent a fresh wave of despair through her, a sickening lurch in her gut. The humiliation would be unbearable, the perceived betrayal unforgivable. She imagined their faces, their anger, their disgust. "What do you want from me?" Anya demanded, pushing herself to her feet, her wolf form trembling with suppressed fury, a desperate attempt to find an escape. "You have me. I am your prisoner. What more could you possibly want?" Cale's gaze held hers, unwavering, as if peering into her very soul. "I want you to understand your position, Anya, to accept it. You are my mate. That means a responsibility, to me, to my tribe, and yes, to yourself. This bond means you feel what I feel. My pain, my anger, my desires, and I, yours. There is no escaping it." He paused, a muscle in his jaw clenching, a subtle tremor of his own vulnerability. "It also means, in time, you will feel a loyalty, a possessiveness, towards me, towards this tribe. It is the nature of the bond." Anya snarled, an indignant, furious sound, a desperate denial of his words. "Never! I will never betray my clan. I will never feel loyalty to you, you monster. I will rather die." Cale simply watched her with a weary patience, a calm that infuriated her even more. "We shall see. The bond has its own will. It demands reciprocity, harmony. Eventually, it will demand that you cease fighting it." He took a step closer, his presence radiating an undeniable power, a subtle possessiveness that sent shivers down her spine, a silent claim. "You were born to conquer, Anya, but even a conqueror must adapt. And now, you are bound to your enemy. How you choose to navigate that will determine your fate, and perhaps the fate of our clans." He turned and left the cavern, his shadow disappearing from the doorway, leaving Anya once again alone with the suffocating weight of the bond and the chilling implications of his words. Her entire existence, her fierce independence, her unwavering loyalty, was being challenged at its very core. The enemy had marked her in battle, and now she was not just his prisoner, but his mate, his weakness, and perhaps, as he claimed, his weapon. The thought of becoming a weapon for him, of betraying her clan, sent a fresh wave of despair through her. A cold dread that settled deep in her bones. But deep within her, a stubborn ember of defiance still glowed, a tiny spark refusing to be extinguished. She would not break. She would find a way to conquer this unwanted bond, even if it meant conquering herself. The days bled into weeks, each one a relentless battle of wills between Anya and Kale, and an even fiercer war within herself. The bond, once a raw, agonizing wound, had subtly shifted. It was no longer a searing pain, but a constant, undeniable current, a low hum beneath her skin that tethered her to Kale. She could feel his moods, the ebb and flow of his emotions, a disorienting, often frustrating intrusion. His anger, sharp and primal, would briefly ignite a matching spark within her, a terrifying resonance. His moments of weary solitude, of quiet contemplation, would evoke a strange, empathetic resonance. She hated it, resented it, but she couldn't escape it. It was a part of her now. Kale continued his visits, his presence a dominant force in her small cavern. He no longer simply observed, he began to engage her, not in threats, but in a strange, almost intellectual sparring. He would discuss tribe strategy, the intricacies of their mountain territory, the challenges of leading the Ironfang tribe. He spoke of the ancient grievances, not as justification for war, but as historical context, painting a picture of his people's struggles and their fierce determination to survive in a harsh, unforgiving land. Anya, despite herself, found her mind engaging. She was a strategist, a leader, and the insights he offered, though from the enemy's perspective, were undeniably valuable. She would counter his arguments, challenge his assumptions, her fierce intelligence shining through her initial defiance, refusing to be intellectually subjugated. Their conversations became a strange dance, a mental fencing match where the stakes were high, and the lines between enemy and mate blurred with unsettling regularity, leaving her disoriented. One afternoon, Kale entered her cavern, his face grim, a palpable sense of frustration radiating from him through the bond. Anya, still in her wolf form, felt a restless agitation stir within her, a mirroring of his inner turmoil. "What is it?" she rasped, her voice still rough from disuse, but tinged with a reluctant curiosity, a strange concern she couldn't suppress. Kale paced the small space, his powerful frame radiating a barely contained tension, like a coiled spring. "Stonehide scouts," he growled, his amber eyes flashing with irritation, a dangerous spark. "They're becoming bolder, too close to our borders. We lost a young warrior this morning, ambushed near the sunken peaks. He was barely an adult, just earned his marks." A pang, sharp and unexpected, shot through Anya. Not of joy, but of a strange, empathetic sorrow, a shared grief that transcended tribal lines. A young Stonehide life lost was a tragedy. A young Ironfang life lost still felt like a loss. The bond was blurring her understanding of enemy, of victory, of loss, twisting her perceptions in agonizing ways. She hated it, hated the vulnerability it created. "Our clans are at war, Kale," she retorted, forcing defiance into her voice, trying to push away the encroaching empathy. "Casualties are inevitable. It is the cost of conflict." Kale stopped, his gaze fixing on her, unblinking. "And yet, you felt that, didn't you? The anger, the grief. My grief. The bond works both ways, Anya. It connects us, inextricably. Even in war, our hearts beat a shared rhythm. He shifted, transforming into his human form, his presence even more imposing in the confined space. You understand strategy, Anya. You understand the cost of war. Tell me, how would you have handled the Stonehide scouts? The question caught her off guard. It was an invitation, a challenge, a subtle acknowledgement of her own tactical prowess, a recognition of her worth beyond her status as a prisoner. Despite her animosity, her strategic mind, long accustomed to analyzing combat scenarios, instinctively engaged. I would have sent a larger patrol, she began, her voice gaining a hesitant strength, her mind already forming a tactical response. Set a trap. Or, if the objective was purely reconnaissance, I would have used stealth, not direct confrontation, to gather information and report back. Cale listened, his expression unreadable, then nodded slowly, a grim acceptance. Precisely. Your clan is becoming reckless. Garnet is making mistakes. Their thirst for revenge blinds them to logical strategy. His amber eyes met hers, a strange intensity in their depths. Perhaps you can teach them caution, Anya, when this war is over. When I am free, Anya corrected, her voice firm, a defiant tremor in her tone. And I will be. I was not born to kneel. I was born to conquer. Cale's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a flash of something akin to admiration in his eyes. No, he agreed, his voice almost a whisper. You were not. And that is why you are both my weakness and my weapon. A volatile combination indeed. The next few days brought a subtle shift in her circumstances. Cale began to allow her out of her cavern, under strict guard, to walk within a secure section of the stronghold. The fresh air, the sounds of the active Ironfang tribe, the distant scent of pine and stone, were a welcome, if bittersweet, relief. She observed them. The young warriors training, the elders sharing stories, the pups playing with a boisterous energy. She saw not just enemies, but a tribe, a community, driven by the same instincts of loyalty and survival as her own. The bond, subtly, continually, softened her hardened perceptions, stripping away the layers of prejudice. She could feel Cale's pride in his tribe, his unwavering devotion to their well-being, and it was a sentiment she intimately understood, a shared language of leadership. She noticed the subtle nuances of Ironfang communication, the way they moved, the quiet respect they held for their chieftain. She recognized the fierce loyalty in their amber eyes, a mirror of the same loyalty she held for her Stonehide kin. It was disorienting to see her enemy in such a way, not as a faceless, monstrous entity, but as a living, breathing tribe with their own struggles, their own loves, their own fears, just like her own. Cale continued to challenge her, to probe her mind, testing her strategic thinking, her knowledge of the surrounding territories, her understanding of tribe dynamics. He treated her not just as a prisoner, but as a valuable resource, a strategic mind to be leveraged, a chess piece to be utilized. He never spoke of her clan as an enemy in these discussions, but rather as the other side, a detached, almost academic tone that made her internal conflict even more profound, blurring the lines of allegiance. One evening, Cale entered her cavern, a small, worn leather-bound scroll in his hand. He sat opposite her, his amber eyes holding hers with an unblinking intensity. "This is our history, Anya," he said, his voice low. "The history of the Ironfang tribe, our ancient sagas, our traditions, our grievances. You are now part of this tribe, whether you wish it or not. You should understand our past, if you are to understand our present." Anya looked at the scroll, then back at Cale, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "Are you trying to indoctrinate me?" She scoffed, a bitter taste in her mouth. Cale's lips curled into a faint smile, a rare, fleeting expression. "I am trying to ensure your survival, Anya, and perhaps the survival of both our tribes. Knowledge is power. And in this bond, our futures are inextricably linked. You cannot fight me forever without tearing yourself apart. The bond will demand that you understand, that you accept, and perhaps that you come to care." His words struck a chilling chord. The bond. It was the ultimate weapon, a force designed to bend her will, to erode her very identity, to subtly convert her. She felt a surge of panic, a desperate fear of losing herself, of becoming subservient to her enemy, of becoming everything she despised. "I will never care for you, Cale," Anya stated, her voice trembling with the effort to project defiance, to cling to her dwindling autonomy. "I will never be Ironfang." Cale simply watched her, his amber eyes calm, unreadable. "We shall see, Anya. We shall see." He placed the scroll on the floor between them, a silent challenge, an unspoken invitation. He left her alone, leaving her with the weight of his words, the presence of his history, and the relentless, undeniable hum of the bond, slowly but surely weaving her into the fabric of his tribe. The battle for her heart and soul had truly begun. The worn leather-bound scroll lay on the cold stone floor, a tangible representation of Cale's subtle war against her will. Anya stared at it for a long time, the weight of its unspoken invitation pressing down on her, a silent challenge. To read it felt like a capitulation, a surrender to the insidious influence of the bond, a step towards losing herself. But her intellectual curiosity, her desperate need to understand her enemy, gnawed at her. She was a strategist. Knowledge was a weapon. And if she was to fight Cale, truly fight him, she needed to understand him. Truly understand the Ironfang tribe from within. Finally, with a frustrated sigh that echoed in the silent cavern, she picked it up. The parchment felt ancient, its pages brittle, filled with elegant, sprawling script and intricate illustrations. It was a history of the Ironfang tribe, spanning centuries. She read about their origins in the harsh, desolate mountainlands, their struggles for survival against relentless blizzards and formidable predators. She learned of their revered ancestors, their cunning chieftains, and the brutal wars they had fought to protect their territory and their people. She discovered the root of their bitter feud with the Stonehide clan, not just a vague animosity, but specific, devastating betrayals, disputed resource veins, and a tragic incident involving a massacred trade caravan, an act of perceived aggression that had led to generations of bloody retribution. The narrative, told from the Ironfang perspective, painted her own Stonehide ancestors in a harsh, unforgiving light. It was disorienting, challenging her ingrained beliefs, forcing her to confront a different version of history. A history where her own clan was not always the righteous victim, where their actions were painted in shades of crass, gray. As she read, Anya felt the bond pulse with Cale's presence, a low, constant hum that seemed to amplify the stories, to infuse them with an almost visceral reality. She could feel his pride in his ancestors, his unwavering loyalty to his people, his deep-seated sense of historical grievance. It was unsettling to experience his emotions, to see the world through his eyes, even for fleeting moments. The line between her own identity and his began to blur, a terrifying and irresistible pull, like a tide dragging her out to sea. Cale continued to visit her, but their conversations now shifted. He would ask her about the scroll, about her impressions of Ironfang history, probing her thoughts, challenging her reactions. He never gloated, never demanded agreement, but rather encouraged debate, a deeper understanding, a nuanced perspective. He was not trying to convert her, but to enlighten her, to show her the complexity of their shared history, to dismantle the simplistic good versus evil narrative she had always clung to, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths. "You see now, don't you?" Cale asked her one evening, his amber eyes fixed on her, unblinking. "The war is not just about territory. It is about ancient wounds, about perceived injustices, about generations of fear and mistrust. Both our clans are products of their history. Both believe they are in the right. Both bleed for their convictions." Anya bristled, her ingrained loyalty still fighting against the revelations, a desperate struggle within her. "My clan fights for justice, Cale. We fight to reclaim what was stolen from us." Cale nodded slowly, a grim acceptance. "And my tribe fights for survival, Anya. To protect what little they have left, to avenge those they lost. The cycle continues, unless someone chooses to break it." He paused, his gaze intensifying, a silent challenge in his eyes. "You have seen the cost of this war, Anya. You have seen the pups die. You have seen the warriors fall. How many more must suffer before we find a different path, before the very mountains run red with our blood?" His words struck a chord, resonating with the very doubts that had begun to plague her. The endless bloodshed, the pointless sacrifices, the perpetual cycle of hatred. She had always accepted it as inevitable, a natural order, but now, seeing it through Cale's eyes, through the lens of a shared bond, the futility of it became painfully clear, a crushing weight on her soul. One day, while reading a passage about a particularly brutal Ironfang defeat, a massacre at the Obsidian Pass, Anya felt a surge of frustration, a pang of injustice that wasn't entirely her own. It was Cale's deep-seated resentment, his historical pain, mirroring within her. She realized, with a chilling clarity, that the bond was not just connecting their emotions, but subtly influencing her own perceptions, drawing her deeper into his world, into his truth, into the very heart of his grief. The realization sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She was losing herself, her fiercely independent Stonehide identity, slowly being eroded by the constant intimacy of the bond. She fought back, mentally erecting walls, clinging to memories of her clan, of Garnet, of her unwavering loyalty. But the bond was a persistent, insidious force, seeping through every crack in her defenses, eroding her will. Cale, ever perceptive, seemed to sense her internal struggle. He offered her more freedom within the stronghold, allowing her to interact with some of the elder Ironfang females, who, through quiet observation, seemed to assess her. They were cautious, their amber eyes holding a mixture of suspicion and a deep ancient wisdom. They spoke of the bond, not with fear, but with a quiet understanding, seeing it as a powerful, sometimes unpredictable force of nature, a gift from the ancient spirits. One elder, a venerable she-wolf named Stona, with fur the color of granite and eyes that held centuries of wisdom, spoke to Anya of the sacredness of the true mate bond, a rare occurrence that transcended clan boundaries, chosen by the spirits to bring balance to warring factions. Anya scoffed at the notion, refusing to believe in such mystical romanticism, clinging to her scientific pragmatism. But Stona's words, spoken with such quiet conviction, planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a quote, tiny crack in her armor of denial. As the days passed, Anya found herself inadvertently absorbing more of the Iron Fang culture. She observed their training rituals, their hunting techniques, their unique way of communicating through subtle shifts in body language and guttural vocalizations. She saw their resilience, their stoicism in the face of adversity, their deep connection to the wild, untamed lands they called home. She began to appreciate their fierce independence, a trait she recognized in herself, a mirroring of her own warrior spirit. The enemy was no longer a faceless entity, but a complex, resilient people, survivors against overwhelming odds. The constant reports of skirmishes, the escalating tension between the clans, fueled her internal conflict. She felt the Stonehides' frustration through the bond, their desperate need for retribution, their mounting anger. And she felt Kale's unwavering resolve to protect his tribe, his willingness to meet force with force, his unyielding determination. She was caught in the middle, a living bridge between two warring worlds, burdened by the agony of both, a shared crucible of pain. One night, Anya awoke with a jolt, a chilling sensation of profound grief echoing through the bond. It was Kale's grief, raw and unconcealed, a wave of agony that crashed over her. She sat up, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat. Kale was not one to show such emotion. Something terrible had happened. She heard frantic movements in the stronghold, hushed whispers, a palpable sense of sorrow, a mournful keening that chilled her to the bone. She paced her cavern, her anxiety mounting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kale entered, his powerful form slumping against the doorframe, his amber eyes dull with a deep, crushing sorrow. He was in his human form, but his usual formidable presence seemed diminished, weighed down by an immense burden, a crushing weight of despair. "What happened?" Anya demanded, her voice unusually soft, compelled by the raw anguish emanating from him through the bond, a genuine concern she couldn't suppress. Kale looked at her, his gaze vacant, then shook his head, a single guttural sob escaping him, a sound of profound pain. "Our lorekeeper," he whispered, his voice hoarse with unshed tears. "He was ambushed by Stonehide warriors near the old Sentinel Pass. He didn't make it. He was old, unarmed. He was collecting rare herbs for the ancestral ceremonies." Anya felt a sickening lurch in her stomach, a cold dread. A lorekeeper, unarmed, by her clan. The Stonehide clan, her clan, had crossed a line. This was not war. This was a cowardly, dishonorable act, a violation of unspoken rules. A wave of profound shame washed over her, mingled with Kale's overwhelming grief, a shared burden of sorrow. The bond, instead of punishing her, now radiated a shared sorrow, a mutual outrage, binding them in their common pain. Kale looked up, his amber eyes blazing with a raw, terrifying fury that Anya felt to her core, a searing heat that consumed them both. "This is no longer just war, Anya," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, cold as steel. "This is a vendetta. They have crossed a line. And there will be consequences, brutal consequences. We will burn them to the ground." Anya watched him, her heart heavy with the weight of his grief and her own shame. The perceived injustice, the cowardly act of her own clan, had shattered her last remaining illusions of Stonehide righteousness, of their moral superiority. She felt a profound sense of despair. The war was escalating, descending into a brutal cycle of senseless violence, fueled by ancient hatreds and fresh wounds. And she was caught in the middle, bound to the enemy, witness to the escalating madness, and feeling an unsettling, unwanted empathy for his pain. The bond had truly become her weakness, and perhaps his ultimate weapon, binding her not just physically, but emotionally, to his escalating desire for retribution. The path to conquest for Anya now felt more complicated, shadowed by the looming darkness of true war, a path to utter annihilation. The death of the Ironfang lorekeeper ignited a terrifying inferno within Kale. Anya felt it through the bond, a searing, relentless rage that eclipsed all other emotions, a consuming fire that threatened to burn them both. It was a primal, all-consuming fury, a thirst for retribution that vibrated through her own veins, an unwelcome resonance that left her feeling both sickened and disturbingly, empathetically drawn into his quate, escalating thirst for vengeance. The careful, strategic discussion ceased, replaced by a grim, silent determination. Kale became a shadow, moving with a palpable aura of menace, his amber eyes burning with a chilling intensity, promising retribution. The Ironfang stronghold, usually a place of quiet activity, pulsed with a grim tension. Warriors trained with a renewed, ferocious zeal, their snarls echoing through the caverns, their movements sharp and aggressive. The pups, usually boisterous, were subdued, sensing the palpable grief and rage that permeated the air, their innocent eyes reflecting the grim mood. Anya watched it all, a helpless spectator to the escalating tragedy, her heart heavy with the weight of shared sorrow and a growing, desperate fear for what was to come. She felt her own clan's grief, their initial elation at a perceived victory quickly turning to grim satisfaction, a sense of having cribblé. 1. A skirmish, utterly unaware of the devastating ripple effect of their actions, of the monster they had unwittingly awakened. Kale, no longer engaging Anya in intellectual debates, simply existed within her consciousness as a constant, burning presence of rage. She saw flashes of his memories, not clear visions, but emotional echoes, the kind, wizened face of the elder lorekeeper, his gentle hands tending to wounded scrolls, his quiet wisdom, his unwavering dedication to the tribe's history. These fragmented glimpses deepened Anya's own sense of shame and sorrow. Her clan had committed an atrocity, a violation of the unspoken codes of war, a breach of sacred tradition. One morning, Kale entered her cavern, his form radiating an icy resolve, his movements precise and deadly. He stood before her, his amber eyes fixed on her, devoid of any warmth, any recognition of their shared past conversations. "We move at dawn," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly growl, cold as steel, absolute in its conviction. "We will push deep into Stonehide territory. We will not stop until they have paid for this unforgivable act. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. Every Stonehide will feel our vengeance." Anya felt a cold dread settle over her, a chilling certainty that apocalypse was at hand. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a full-scale assault, driven by raw, unbridled vengeance, a thirst for annihilation. She instinctively shifted into her wolf form, her fur bristling, her green eyes wide with alarm, reflecting the horror she felt. "Kale, no," she pleaded, her voice raw with desperation, a guttural cry from deep within her. "This will lead to utter destruction. It's a lorekeeper. It's not worth destroying both our clans. There will be nothing left but ashes." Kale's gaze hardened, his amber eyes burning with an unyielding fury, a terrifying, unbreakable resolve. "It is worth everything, Anya. It is about honor, about justice, about avenging the innocent, and it is about showing your clan the true cost of their barbarity, the price of their hubris." He turned, his powerful form radiating an unwavering determination, and left the cavern, leaving Anya with the chilling implications of his words, with the taste of impending doom. The bond pulsed with his resolve, a horrifying, almost intoxicating wave of righteous fury that threatened to engulf her, to drag her down into his abyss of vengeance. She fought against it, clinging to her own sense of reason, her understanding of strategic folly, the cold, logical facts of mutual annihilation, but the sheer force of his emotion was overwhelming, a tidal wave, threatening to drown her. She had to stop him. She had to prevent this catastrophic war from erupting. But how? She was a prisoner, bound to her enemy, her every move monitored, her every thought subtly influenced by the very being she desperately needed to thwart. Despair threatened to consume her, a crushing weight on her chest, but then, a flicker of defiance, a spark of the conqueror she had always been, ignited within her. She was not born to kneel. She was not born to simply witness the destruction. She was a beta, a leader, a protector. She had to find a way, even if it meant sacrificing herself. She began to pace her cavern, her mind racing, frantically searching for an answer, for a desperate gambit. She thought of everything Kale had shown her, everything she had learned about the Ironfang tribe, their history, their vulnerabilities, their strengths. She recalled the discussions about territory, about the old rituals, about the subtle nuances of their communication. She remembered his pride in his tribe, his desire to protect them, his deep, unwavering love for his people. That was his strength. That was his weakness. The thread she could pull. Then, a desperate, audacious plan began to form in her mind. A plan born of desperation and the agonizing intimacy of the bond. It was a risky, almost suicidal gambit, but it was the only way she could see to potentially avert the impending catastrophe. It would mean leveraging the bond, turning it against its intended purpose, using her own perceived weakness as a weapon, a final, desperate gamble. As the first sliver of dawn touched the mountain peaks, casting long, eerie shadows across the stronghold, Kale gathered his warriors. The air crackled with a grim determination, the scent of revenge thick and palpable, an almost living thing. Anya, watching from her cavern, felt her heart pound with a terrifying mixture of dread and resolute purpose. This was her last chance, her only chance. Just as Kale was about to give the command to advance, Anya initiated her plan. She focused all her energy, every ounce of her will, on the bond, not to fight it, but to manipulate it. She projected an overwhelming wave of emotion, the desperate raw plea that she knew Kale, through their bond, would feel to his core. She unleashed a torrent of images. The stone-hide pups, innocent and vulnerable, similar to his own, their small faces filled with fear, the devastation of a full-scale war, not just on the battlefield, but on the families left behind, the mothers weeping, the homes burning, the futility of endless bloodshed, generation after generation repeating the same cycle of hatred, a grim, endless dance of death. She sent him the purest form of reason, stripped of emotion, the cold, hard facts of strategic suicide, of a Pyrrhic victory where both sides lost everything. And intertwined with it, she projected her own overwhelming sense of sorrow for the lore-keeper, her own deep, empathetic understanding of his grief, not as an enemy, but as a shared sorrow. She sent him the full weight of the bond, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, forcing him to see the consequences of his actions through her eyes, through a shared humanity that transcended their ingrained animosity, that screamed for life. Kale, standing at the head of his charging warriors, suddenly faltered. A tremor ran through his powerful frame, a visible shiver. He stumbled, his amber eyes wide with confusion, a torrent of conflicting emotions and images washing over him through the bond. The raw fury that had consumed him, the single-minded thirst for vengeance, was suddenly assailed by doubt, by a terrifying awareness of the deeper cost, of the utter emptiness that would follow his victory. He saw the faces of the stone-hide pups, felt Anya's raw anguish, her strategic foresight screaming the folly of his path. The bond, meant to bind her to him, was now binding him to her truth, to her vision of shared destruction. He roared, a guttural sound of internal torment, fighting against the overwhelming surge of emotion and reason Anya was projecting, a desperate struggle against himself. His warriors, bewildered by their chieftain's sudden hesitation, looked at him, then at each other, their eager anticipation replaced by confusion, by an uneasy uncertainty. Anya continued her mental assault, pushing harder, pouring every ounce of her will into the bond, desperately trying to break through his rage, to reach the core of the leader she knew him to be. She sent him an image of the lore-keeper's peaceful face, a silent accusation of how his death would be truly avenged, not by more death, but by an end to the cycle, by a future where such tragedies would cease. She projected a deep, abiding respect for his leadership, acknowledging his pain, but also the greater responsibility he held, the legacy he truly sought to build. Finally, Kale straightened, his powerful form trembling, his amber eyes still clouded with internal conflict. He lifted his head, and his voice, though still raw, carried a new command, one that stunned his waiting warriors into immediate silence, piercing the tension like a shard of ice. "Stand down!" he bellowed, his voice raw with the effort, tinged with a profound exhaustion. "We do not advance, not now, not like this. Not for this. The cost is too great." The Iron Fang warriors, their faces a mixture of confusion and disappointment, slowly lowered themselves. The scent of revenge, which had hung so heavily in the air, began to dissipate, replaced by a bewildered silence, a quiet questioning. Kale turned, his amber eyes, still raw with turmoil, met Anya's green ones. The bond pulsed, not with anger, but with a profound exhaustion, a grudging acknowledgement, and a nascent, unsettling respect. He had felt her plea, her pain, her reason. He had been forced to see his path not just through his own grief, but through hers, through the unwilling, undeniable connection that bound them. He walked towards her, his steps slow, deliberate, as if each one was a struggle against his own nature. He stopped before her cavern, his gaze unwavering. "You truly are a weapon, Anya," he stated, his voice low, a note of awe in its depths, a profound realization. "But not the one I expected. You are far more dangerous." He paused, his amber eyes searching hers, a silent question. "You stopped me. Why?" Anya, still exhausted from her mental exertion, shifted into her human form, her limbs trembling, every muscle aching. "Because this war," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "it ends with nothing but graves, for both our clans. This isn't about conquest, Kale, it's about survival. For all of us. For the very future of our kind." Kale looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing beyond the enemy, beyond the prisoner, beyond the mate. He saw the strategist, the protector, the warrior whose loyalty, though challenged, remained fierce. The bond, which had once been a symbol of her weakness, had become her ultimate strength, a bridge between two warring worlds, forcing an impossible truth upon them both. The war was far from over, but for the first time, a fragile seed of something else, something beyond hatred, had been planted between the chieftain of the Ironfang tribe and the beta of the Stonehide clan. And in that shared moment of fragile understanding, the path to true conquest, for Anya, suddenly looked very different, illuminated by a terrifying yet undeniable light. The immediate aftermath of Cale's averted offensive was a fragile truce, born not of negotiation, but of a profound, unsettling understanding between him and Anya. The Ironfang warriors, still reeling from their chieftain's abrupt change of command, watched Anya with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. They sensed the immense shift in Cale's demeanor, the raw emotion that had washed over him through the bond, and they knew, instinctively, that the Stonehide beta was somehow responsible for his unprecedented decision. Cale, now fully committed to the truce, maintained a strict adherence to its terms. He enforced strict patrol boundaries, ensured his warriors avoided any provocative actions, and devoted significant time to strategic discussions with Anya. Their conversations, once intellectual sparring matches, evolved into deeper, more collaborative planning sessions. Anya's knowledge of Stonehide tactics, combined with Cale's understanding of their own strengths, allowed them to anticipate potential flashpoints and mitigate misunderstandings, creating a fragile network of cautious peace. Anya, for her part, slowly, reluctantly, began to integrate into the daily rhythm of the Ironfang stronghold. She participated in tribe hunts, her skill and agility surprising many of the younger warriors who had only heard legends of Stonehide prowess. She helped tend to the pups, her gentle nature disarming even the most suspicious elders. Her green eyes, once filled with defiance, now held a growing sense of understanding, observing the nuances of Ironfang life. She saw their fierce loyalty, their deep familial bonds, their pragmatic approach to survival in the harsh mountains. They were not so different from her own clan, just hardened by a different set of struggles, shaped by a different history, a different set of scars. The bond, once a source of unbearable pain and resentment, had settled into a steady, undeniable presence. It no longer caused her physical agony, but a profound, almost comforting sense of connection. She felt Cale's quiet strength, his unwavering determination, his moments of weary solitude after a long day of leading, the immense weight he carried. And he, in turn, felt her quiet observations, her sharp intellect, her innate desire for justice. The intimacy of the bond, while still unnerving at times, was undeniably deepening, blurring the lines of enemy and mate, forging something new and profound. The matriarch of the Ironfang tribe, Silas, Cale's fiercely loyal and protective mother, initially viewed Anya with profound suspicion. Her amber eyes, identical to Cale's, held a deep, ancient mistrust of the Stonehides. But as weeks turned into months, Silas observed Anya's dedication to the truce, her genuine concern for the Ironfang pups, her unwavering integrity in their strategic discussions. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Silas's suspicion began to thaw, replaced by a cautious respect. She recognized the pain in Anya's eyes, the sacrifices she was making for the sake of an impossible peace, a peace that seemed to defy generations of blood feud. One afternoon, Silas approached Anya as she was watching the young pups play, her voice softer than Anya had ever heard it. "You have earned the respect of my tribe, Anya," Silas stated, her voice calm, devoid of her usual frostiness. "Even if you were once our enemy, your efforts towards this truce, they are clear. Your sacrifice, undeniable." Anya turned, surprised by the matriarch's unexpected words, her heart stirring. I am simply trying to prevent further bloodshed, Matriarch Silas. For both our clans. For the future of all our pups. Silas nodded, her gaze sweeping over the playful pups, a rare gentle smile gracing her lips. And for that, we are grateful. This bond, it is a strange and powerful thing. It has chosen its own path. Perhaps it has chosen wisely. Perhaps it is a blessing in disguise, a sign from the ancestors. Her words, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond's legitimacy, offered a profound validation that Anya hadn't realized she craved, a balm to her weary soul. Despite the growing integration, Anya never forgot her Stonehide roots. She missed her clan, the familiar sense of her home, the camaraderie of her warriors, the wide-open plains. She often thought of Garnet, of Odin, wondering how they viewed her now, if their anger had subsided, if they understood the profound sacrifices she was making, the impossible position she was in. The bond, while connecting her to Kale, also served as a constant reminder of the chasm that still separated her from her own kind, a silent ache. Kale, sensing her quiet longing through the bond, often spoke of the need for true reconciliation, not just a temporary truce. "A year of peace is merely a reprieve, Anya," he stated one evening, his voice low, his amber eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "If we do not address the root causes of our conflict, the hatred will simply simmer, waiting for an opportunity to explode again. The bond, our bond, it forces us to confront this. We are a living example of what is possible, or what will be destroyed if we fail. It is a crucible, testing our will." Their shared determination to forge a lasting peace led them to delve deeper into the ancient grievances, meticulously examining the historical accounts from both perspectives. They uncovered layers of misunderstanding, misinterpretations of events, and deliberate manipulations by opportunistic individuals from both sides, long since deceased, who thrived on chaos. The massacred trade caravan, a pivotal moment in their shared history, was discovered to have been an act of rogue bandits, not the Stonehide clan, exaggerated and twisted by a power-hungry warlord who sought to gain territory through conflict. The truth, when unearthed, was often far less dramatic and far more tragic than the legends had suggested, revealing a pattern of deceit and manipulation. The realization of how much of their hatred was built on fabrications, on misunderstandings, was a painful but necessary step. It fueled their resolve to present the truth to their respective clans, to dismantle the foundations of generations of animosity, to cut out the rot at the root of their conflict. As the year of truce approached its end, the tension between the clans, though still present, had significantly lessened. Sporadic communications, initiated by Kale, had been exchanged between him and Garnet, discussing logistical matters, reporting minor incidents, a tentative dialogue replacing the bitter silence. A bridge being slowly built across the chasm. Kale and Anya formulated a comprehensive plan for a second, more expansive meeting at the ancient ancestral stones, a sacred, neutral ground deep within the mountain range, a place where, long ago, pacts were forged between disparate tribes. This time, it would involve not just the chieftains and betas, but a select group of elders and trusted warriors from both clans. The goal was to present the newly discovered truths of their shared history, to dismantle the myths, and to propose a long-term plan for coexistence, possibly even eventual integration, a shared future. The night before the crucial meeting, Anya sat with Kale in his den chamber, the bond thrumming with a shared sense of trepidation and anticipation. She had spent countless hours with him, strategizing, debating, feeling his emotions, And subtly, irrevocably, her feelings for him had shifted. The initial revulsion she had felt had long since faded, replaced by a grudging respect, then a burgeoning admiration for his leadership, his unwavering loyalty to his tribe, his quiet strength. The raw, primal possessiveness of the bond had been tempered by genuine connection, by shared purpose, by a nascent love she hadn't dared to name. She still harbored a fierce independence, a desire for her freedom, but it was no longer a desire to escape him, but a desire to be free with him, to build a future together, a future where their clans could coexist in harmony. The enemy had indeed marked her in battle, but in her captivity she had found something unexpected, something profound. "Are you ready for this, Anya?" Cale asked, his voice low, his amber eyes holding hers, a rare vulnerability in their depths, a flicker of uncertainty. This could go either way. They could reject us. They could choose war, choose to cling to their hatred. Anya nodded, her gaze unwavering, her resolve hardening. "We have to try, Cale. For our clans, for the pups, for the future. This bond," she paused, her voice softening, a profound truth in her words. "It chose us for a reason, and perhaps that reason is to be the bridge. The first step towards a new dawn, a true peace." She reached out, her hand tentatively resting on his arm, a gesture of comfort and connection. He looked at her, surprised, then slowly, his fingers covered hers, a warm, reassuring squeeze, a silent acknowledgement. The bond surged, a powerful, unifying current that enveloped them both, a brilliant, radiant warmth. They were no longer just chieftain and beta, prisoner and captor, enemy and mate. They were two wolves, bound by an impossible destiny, standing on the precipice of a new era, ready to face the dawn, together, for the sake of their intertwined future, for the hope of all their kin. The ancestral stones, usually an austere monument of ancient tradition, crackled with a palpable tension that morning. Representatives from both the Stonehide clan and the Ironfang tribe stood facing each other, a narrow, unspoken chasm between them, etched by centuries of bitter rivalry. Garnet, Anya's chieftain, stood tall, her features etched with wary resolve, Odin a tense, watchful presence beside her. Cale, with Anya beside him, radiated an aura of calm authority, his amber eyes sweeping over both gatherings, assessing the mood, the undercurrents of suspicion. The air was thick with mistrust, suspicion clinging to every silence, every subtle shift of weight, like a shroud. Anya, standing beside Cale, felt the raw emotions of both clans through the bond, an overwhelming symphony of hope, fear, suspicion, and deep-seated animosity. She felt Garnet's guarded optimism, Odin's simmering resentment, and the cautious hope of the Ironfang elders. It was a dizzying, emotionally draining experience, but it also solidified her resolve. They had to succeed. Failure was not an option. Cale stepped forward, his powerful voice cutting through the silence, commanding attention. "We are here today, not as enemies, but as leaders. Leaders burdened by the suffering of our people, by generations of pointless bloodshed. The truce, born of a desperate necessity, has shown us a different path, a path towards understanding, towards a shared future, towards a life free from endless war." He then gestured to Anya. "And the catalyst for this path is the bond, the mate bond that has sealed between myself and Anya, Beta of the Stonehide clan." His words were met with a ripple of murmurs, a mixture of awe and disbelief from both sides, a shocking revelation for many. Garnet's eyes flashed, her voice sharp, challenging. "A bond forced in violation, Cale, a mark of your aggression. How can we trust this bond when it was forged in such a manner? Perhaps, Cale conceded, his gaze unwavering, acknowledging the truth of her accusation. But the bond, once sealed, chooses its own course. It demands harmony. It demands a breaking of the ancient cycle. And it has compelled Anya and I to uncover the truth of our shared history, a history obscured by lies. He then began to present their findings, meticulously detailing the historical inaccuracies, the fabrications that had fueled centuries of hatred. He spoke of the massacred trade caravan, not as a deliberate act of Stonehide aggression, but as a tragic accident, the work of rogue bandits. A natural disaster twisted by a manipulative warlord seeking to incite war for personal gain, to expand his own power. He presented evidence, ancient scrolls, deciphered by Anya, corroborated by long-forgotten Iron Fang oral histories, detailing the true origins of their feud, stripping away the layers of deceit. The Stonehide elders listened, their faces a mixture of skepticism and growing disquiet, their expressions shifting as the undeniable facts were laid bare. Odin, initially dismissive, his arms crossed in defiance, found his rigid posture faltering as the logical, undeniable evidence mounted, his jaw tightening in reluctant acceptance. Anya, through the bond, felt the subtle shifts in their understanding, the dawning realization of how deeply they had been deceived, how their own history had been manipulated. Then, Anya stepped forward, her green eyes sweeping over her former clan, her voice clear and resonant with conviction, carrying the weight of painful truth. I know this is difficult to hear. I know it challenges everything we have been taught, everything we believed. I, too, struggled with these truths, with the betrayal of our own narratives. But the bond, it forced me to see beyond our ingrained prejudices. It forced me to listen, to understand the other side, to empathize with their pain. She spoke of the Iron Fang's pride, their resilience, their deep love for their lands and their people. Sentiments she had come to appreciate during her captivity, seeing them not as monstrous enemies, but as fellow survivors. She presented them not as savage brutes, but as a tribe shaped by their own history, their own struggles, their own right to exist. She then spoke of the Lorekeeper, her voice heavy with a profound sorrow, a quiet shame. The death of the Iron Fang Lorekeeper, it was an unforgivable act, a violation of the sacred laws of war, a stain on our honor. My clan, our clan, committed this act, and we must acknowledge it. We must atone for it. We must take responsibility for our actions. Her admission, a direct, unequivocal condemnation of her own clan's actions, sent a ripple of shock through the Stonehide contingent, a collective gasp. It was a courageous, self-sacrificing act, designed to force them to confront their own moral failings, to face the ugliness they had wrought. Garnet's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, shame, anger, and a dawning understanding that twisted her features. Odin, his face pale, finally looked away, unable to meet Anya's unwavering gaze, unable to deny the truth in her eyes. Cale then presented their proposal for a lasting peace. Not just a truce, but a pathway to integration, to a true merging of their societies. Shared hunting grounds, joint patrols along the former borders, mutual assistance in times of need, shared ceremonies to honor the fallen from both sides, and a council of elders from both clans to oversee new disputes. It was an ambitious, almost utopian vision, one that challenged every ingrained instinct of their warring cultures, asking them to abandon generations of animosity. This is not surrender. Cale concluded, his voice resonating with authority, with an undeniable conviction. This is survival. This is evolution. This bond between Anya and I, it is a living testament to what is possible. It demands a new future for both our clans, a future where our pups can grow up without the shadow of endless war, where they can thrive together, side by side. A profound silence descended upon the ancestral stones, broken only by the whispers of the wind through the ancient peaks. The gravity of the decision hung heavy in the air, a tangible weight. The weight of centuries of hatred, of ingrained animosity, battled against the compelling vision of peace, the undeniable truths they had just heard, and the living proof of the bond before them, a beacon of an impossible possibility. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Garnet stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Anya, a flicker of pride and sorrow in their depths, a complex mix of emotions. "Anya," she said, her voice strained, thick with emotion. "You have always been a fierce warrior, and now you are a bridge. This truth, it is difficult to swallow, but the death of the lore keeper, it was indeed a stain on our honor, a shameful act. And the evidence of your bond, it is undeniable, a powerful force we cannot ignore." She paused, her gaze sweeping over her bewildered clan, then met Cale's intense amber eyes, a silent challenge. "We will consider your proposal, Cale. We will convene our council, and we will send our answer. But know this, the path to healing these wounds, it will be long, and it will require unwavering commitment from both sides, Every single wolf." Cale nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her cautious acceptance, a grim understanding of the immense challenge ahead. The possibility of peace, however tenuous, had been laid bare, a fragile seed planted in hostile ground. The meeting concluded, the two groups separating, the air still thick with unspoken emotions, but also a nascent hope, a quiet promise of something new. The journey back to the Ironfang stronghold was different. Anya walked beside Cale, not as a prisoner, but as a partner, a shared sense of profound relief and cautious optimism emanating from both of them through the bond, intertwining their spirits. They had taken the first, monumental step. Days turned into weeks of anxious waiting, each moment stretching into an eternity. The bond pulsed with Cale's deep concern, his tireless efforts to prepare his tribe for whatever answer came, to brace them for either peace or renewed conflict. Anya, too, felt the agonizing uncertainty, her heart aching for her Stonehide kin, desperately hoping they would choose the path of peace, the path of healing. Then, the messenger returned, his face unreadable, his posture somber. Cale and Anya met him at the stronghold entrance, their hearts pounding in unison, their breath held. The message, delivered orally, was brief, yet momentous. The Stonehide Council, after intense deliberation, had agreed to the terms of the alliance. The truce would become a pact. The integration would begin. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the Ironfang stronghold, a wave of relief that settled deep in their bones. Cale let out a low, guttural roar of triumph, a sound Anya felt to her core, mingled with his profound gratitude, his immense relief. He turned to her, his amber eyes blazing with a powerful mix of relief, respect, and a deep, undeniable affection, a light she had never seen before. He pulled her close, his powerful arms wrapping around her, a possessive yet tender embrace, a claim made with love, not force. The bond surged, a tumultuous wave of shared emotion, of joy, of purpose, of destiny, a brilliant light that enveloped them both. Anya, nestled against his powerful form, felt her own heart swell, a profound sense of belonging she had never truly experienced before, even within her own clan. She had always been an independent spirit, a warrior who stood slightly apart, a solitary force. But with Kale, she felt whole, balanced, her strength amplified by his, her purpose clear. She was no longer just the beta of the Stonehide clan, or the prisoner of the Ironfang tribe. She was Anya, a warrior, a bridge, a mate to a chieftain who had, against all odds, become her partner, her confidant, her future. The enemy had marked her in battle, bound her to him, but in that bond, in that captivity, she had found not just love, but her true purpose, her ultimate conquest. She had conquered hatred, conquered division, and emerged as a leader, a chieftainess, capable of forging a new legacy for a united people. As the ceremony concluded, the sun, now high in the sky, bathed the ancestral stones in a golden glow, a beacon of hope for the future. The two clans, no longer enemies, but brothers and sisters united under a shared vision, celebrated late into the night. Anya, standing beside Kale, her hand clasped in his, looked out at the joyful faces of their combined tribe. The journey had been long, fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had led her to this moment, to this profound sense of belonging, to this shared purpose. The enemy had indeed marked her in battle, but in that marking, she had found her destiny, her love, and her ultimate victory. The future, once uncertain, now stretched before them, a canvas of endless possibilities, woven together by the unbreakable threads of an impossible bond, a testament to the power of shared understanding and enduring love.